Welcome to Vegan Business Talk with Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. Hello and welcome to episode 56 of Vegan Business Talk. I'm Katrina Fox, journalist, author, media and PR coach, copywriter, editor and proofreader, and founder of Vegan Business Media, a content, events and training platform providing success tips for vegan business owners and entrepreneurs. In this episode, I interview food scientist Mary Mulry, managing director at product development consulting firm FoodWise One in Denver, Colorado. After gaining a PhD in food science and human nutrition, Mary's first jobs were with Kellogg's and Kraft in the early to mid-1980s, working in both analytical chemistry and product development. She entered the natural and organics industry when she took a position in product development at herbal tea company Celestial Seasonings in 1989 and has worked with many companies in this sector, both in the US and internationally, since then. Along with an extensive array of industry partners and connections, Mary brings her wealth of expertise to a range of businesses, from startups to large consumer packaged goods firms. As well as consulting and guidance, she provides technical work, including help with food safety processes and documentation, sourcing ingredients, and project management. In this interview, Mary talks about the technical challenges and considerations involved in scaling up from a home-based kitchen to selling your products in retailers, why it's important to be able to trace your ingredients through the supply chain back to their origin, the approximate investment a vegan business owner needs to make to get help with writing of procedures, making sure your documentation is in place and checking your supply chain, the types of food safety tests you may need to conduct, whether certifications such as vegan, gluten-free and so on are important, and much more. Here's the interview with Mary Mulry of FoodWise One. Hello, Mary. Thank you very much for joining me today.
It's great to be with you, Katrina.
So you've been working in the food industry and the natural foods and product space for quite some time now. I think it's probably more than over 30 years, starting out with some big name brands such as Kellogg's and Kraft. One of the things I always ask people is why they do what they do. So can you tell us a bit about how you got into all this and why you do what you do?
I actually got into food science through a recommendation in high school from my guidance counselor that it was a really good field of applied science because I wanted applied science. And there was a good program where I resided, the University of Wisconsin, so that's where I did my undergrad. The more I got into it, the more interesting it was. And I actually started with doing an undergraduate at University of Wisconsin, and then I did about a year or so Michigan State University in Michigan, and then transferred to University of Florida, where I got a PhD in food science and human nutrition.
Wow.
And my first job was with Kellogg Company in Battle Creek, Michigan, and I started in analytical chemistry because that was my minor. And then I moved into product development and found I liked product development much better. And so I worked in product development for a couple of years there and then moved to Kraft Foods in Glenview, Illinois. And while I was at Kraft, I got a call from a recruiter about a job at Celestial Seasonings in Boulder, Colorado, which I had never been to, but had heard that, both the company and the town were, really progressive. And so I interviewed and they hired me as manager of product development. And that's kind of where I got into the natural and organics food industry. Organics was pretty new at the time, mostly related to commodity products, organic soybeans or corn, or wasn't really all that involved with processed foods. But as time went on, there was much more interest in sort of mimicking conventional foods in the organic foods world, and also I became very interested in a number of trends that were happening sort of at the same time. So the whole plant-based nutrition and supplements and gluten-free, those things came to the forefront as I was consulting and were quite interesting to me.
Fantastic, fantastic. See, I love that you've got that real kind of solid experience in both the food science and product development. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So on that topic, given that you've got all this experience in helping businesses to launch products to market, and I think particularly with a focus on, quality control, ingredients and food science. Now, as I mentioned in my interview with Susan Cascaden, she briefly mentioned how scaling up a food business from a home kitchen to supplying retailers in large volume, it's not just a case of a straightforward scaling up of the ingredients proportionately, which I found really interesting because I don't know too much about the food industry. So I'd love it if you could expand on that in a bit more detail and tell us about some of the issues that small plant-based and vegan business owners need to know about if they're looking to do this.
Well, I work with a lot of startup clients and with, brilliant ideas. But they don't often know a lot about the food industry and the supply chain. So one of the things that I explain to them is that, going from, buying your ingredients at a retail store or maybe even a food service distributor like in the US Cisco, you want to go to, first of all, commercial ingredients, but then as you scale up, it's not a direct proportional scale up. So there's always, when I do product development with companies, I call, it's sort of a 3-phase project. The first phase is the prototype. So you've got a great idea, you've made it in your kitchen, or maybe you've worked with a commercial kitchen, and you have something you really, really like, the way it tastes, the texture, everything about it. But now you've got to use commercial ingredients and, check your costing and make sure that, you can actually sell this for something that will give you a profit. But more importantly, there's a second step, which is scale up. And during the scale up process, you want to try to match as closely as possible your prototype. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes it's quite difficult because with larger quantities and different commercial ingredients, there's sometimes changes, some of which can be adjusted and some that you have to make some compromises. And then the third stage is what I call manufacturing, where you actually go to a full-scale production at a manufacturing plant. And there's another step of both proportionality and, using commercial ingredients in a higher volume.
Cool. Can you give us an example of how that might work with, say, a particular product? You don't have to name the product or a particular type of product.
Well, a good example might be a nutrition bar. So you make a nutrition bar in a little pan on your kitchen counter, and you've used certain ingredients that are whole food ingredients. You really like them. The bar comes out, something that you hand out to your friends, and it's perfect. Okay, and they love it, and they tell you how much you should really go into business, and so you you have all your own kinds of ideas about it. It might be that's got the best nutrition. It might have protein added. It might be gluten-free. It might be vegan. Whatever those requirements are, that's the product and the positioning that you want to have. Well, so then you go to buying commercial ingredients, and first of all, there's a cost issue because when you buy ingredients, there's not just the cost of the ingredients, but the cost of of shipping those ingredients, and sometimes the shipping cost can actually be more expensive than the ingredient itself. And
Wow.
so, you might have to go through a distributor, but you look for ingredients that are high quality, and you ask the manufacturer for specifications for the things that you're interested in, and then you go out and try to find a contract manufacturer, or you might make it yourself in a commercial kitchen. So you make the product in larger quantities, and the product's still pretty good when you first make it, but then you find out that after 2 or 3 months after it equilibrates, it starts to harden. It might, the texture might change, the flavor might change. You might get oxidation of the nuts, or some changes that happen. So it's very different to give your friends a fresh product versus actually doing a shelf life test that says, okay, well, if I'm going to put this through a retail store, I might have to have a 9 month to a year shelf life. And during that time, there might be changes in the product. Some of those changes could be positive, some might not be so positive. And so I've had clients with, particularly with nutrition bars, where the bars will harden up, or the ingredients, that they get in, the contract manufacturer didn't check the quality, and so something went rancid, and now they have to trace back and go, what do we have to change in order to get the product to be exactly what we want it to be.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. You've explained that really accessibly, which I think is wonderful, because I know sometimes with people with like their PhDs in science, they talk in academies. I love that you explain that so accessibly and easily that even someone like me can understand. That's really great. This is so useful and really, really important, because I don't think it is something that a lot of small business owners think about. Like you say, they get that kind of thing from friends and family. Oh, this is amazing. You should make a business out of it, which is why I laughed when you said that. But they don't really necessarily consider these things. I think this is really, really important. So similar to, I guess, related to that, and you've touched on this a little bit, is about, I guess, the importance of quality control or food safety, I guess, because I know you mentioned things like, well, something could go rancid in it. Now, obviously, that could be a major issue if someone eats that and they get sick or something. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of food safety and quality control, and how that looks in reality for different types of food products and business owners?
Sure. The issue of food safety, and particularly in the last several years, because at least in the U.S. and I know globally, there's been a lot more regulation around food safety. In the U.S., it's called the Food Safety Modernization Act, but there's global food safety standards. And in the past, I would say that companies, they didn't really invest in food safety unless they had a problem, so it's sort of like a retroactive look, like, oh, I have a problem, I've had to fix it. Like I had a client that had mold on their product, and, the retailer shipped it back, and, they were losing a lot of business. So they called me and they said, we got to fix it. Well, they didn't have food safety built in. And what I try to tell my clients, particularly startup clients, is you need to build food safety in from the beginning, because number one, liability issues are much more are much larger issues now, because there are consumers who will sue a company, not just go, well, I got sick and please compensate me, but also in the U.S., the Food and Drug Administration, and in other countries, their equivalent regulatory bodies have more power now, where they can actually shut you down if there's a perceived problem. So, so really building in food safety from the beginning through either what's called a HACCP program, hazard analysis, critical control points, or a audited food safety program is really critical. for success, and it's not inexpensive. It's both committing resources from a personnel standpoint, but it's also keeping a lot of records and documents. So what I was talking about in terms of food specifications is really critical. Having very tight specifications and testing of both the raw materials and the finished product, and also understanding what changes ingredients go through during the process. So, for example, a cooked product goes through what they call a kill step. So, your microbiology specifications can be more lenient if you have a cooking step, because that will kill microorganisms. But let's say you're making a bar, like I was talking about before, those products aren't typically cooked. There are baked bars, but for the most part, bars are not baked. And so you have a higher risk, of causing sickness if something comes in with a raw material.
Ooh, I'm glad you've said that, because I'm actually a really big fan of raw vegan bars. So I'm kind of like, okay.
Yeah, raw things has that downside.
Yeah, they've got the plus side in that they're nutritionally great, but yeah, there's that issue, especially because I often wonder that with them being raw, and some of them do have quite a kind of a long shelf life. So I'm curious about how that kind of works. So no, that's great that you've raised that, and I think as well, particularly like we're seeing such a popularity in plant-based alternatives, like plant-based milks, for example. And I think we're already seeing in the US dairy industry trying to clamp down on not even allowing plant-based milks to be called milk. So I'm guessing what I'm hearing is it's really important, to not give these businesses any kind of leeway to criticize your products, and it's great, like as you mentioned, to get that food safety, that food science element in from the beginning, because that was going to be one of my questions. Is so how soon then should someone hire someone like yourself to get all that in place? And I think you've answered that by saying quite near the beginning. Can you talk about just a very, very rough ballpark figure, the kind of investment that a vegan food producer could expect to pay if they wanted to get that all in place?
Well, I would say you're probably talking about $5,000 to $10,000 US for a consultant to advise you and help you through all of the writing of procedures and making sure that your documentation is in place, and making sure that your supply chain is traceable back to its origin. So, the good thing about organic, as an example, is it's a process-based system. So it has to go back to the farm at some point, and that's ideally what you want to be able to do, is be able to trace your ingredients back to ideally the farm, so that if there's a problem with any ingredient, you would be able to identify what step in the supply chain there might have been a problem. And so for a small business, that sounds like a lot of money. But if you look at it in terms of an insurance policy against either a lawsuit or a regulatory agency seizing your product, it's actually a pretty reasonable amount of money.
For sure. And I can imagine retailers wouldn't be too happy either if they took on a product and then a customer said, oh, this has got mold on it, or this has gone rancid and what have you, because then that could impact them taking more of the product and impact the brand's reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. Most retailers will require, say, $2 million worth of liability insurance, but you don't really want to have to call your insurance company and make good on that policy.
No, definitely not. No, this is really, really, really good information, Mary. I really appreciate you sharing all this. It's fabulous intel, and like you said, that it does make sense to get that all in place. Now, when you quoted that and you said that's for like writing all the procedures, what about the actual testing of the ingredients? Like, is there something already in place like that you would know that say, okay, almond nuts are okay to be on the shelf for this amount of time if they're in a product, or is it literally a case of because every product is unique, it's got to go through all those tests individually?
Well, most food ingredients have what I would call pretty simple tests. Things like moisture or water activity, which is related to moisture. Sometimes you have indications of freshness and then microbiology, which is an indicator of food safety. Most of those tests actually run, I would say at most a couple $100. And what you really want to do is push back to your supplier as much as possible to do those tests. They should provide what's called a certificate of analysis, and they will actually do those tests on every lot of material and provide you with a report. And what the FDA really likes is if you verify. So it's kind of like, the old term during the Reagan years here in the U.S. where it was trust but verify. So you want to have good quality suppliers, but you want to be able to verify that the piece of paper that they're giving you is actually accurate. And those tests are really pretty reasonable. And depending on how many lots of product that ingredients that you buy, it may be worthwhile to have your own moisture test in-house, or to do, they have these fast microbiology tests now that don't require extensive, controlled rooms and things like that. So they're pretty much kind of turnkey. So there's a point that you kind of look at. Do I send this out to an analytical lab, or can I actually do it cost effectively myself? Usually the testing part is not the expensive part. Usually the part is actually writing the procedures, developing the documentation, and then recording during your processing everything you do. So if you say it's supposed to be heated to 150 degrees for X amount of time, you either heat it to 150 degrees for the specified amount of time, or if there, something happened where you had to adjust it, you make a note of that. And so it's really, it's paying attention to detail more than anything else, and understanding what are the critical control points in your process that you must pay attention to, whether that's temperature or time or a particular heating step or whatever.
Got it. So that sounds quite complicated for somebody to do. So that's where someone like yourself would come in, because you've got experience with all different types of products, and that's how you can help people. And you could say to them, right, these are the tests that you need to do, and help them to do those. Is that right?
Yes. And also to help them write what I call their own internal specifications, so that they are purchasing ingredients against, what they actually need. So a lot of what a food scientist does is identify, what's not so important from what is really important in terms of food safety and in terms of quality. If you want consistency, you want the right texture, the right color, the right flavor. All those things have impacts on your product.
Fantastic. Now that makes a lot of sense. I can see it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer in some ways then for someone not to hire a food scientist. Like, it makes sense to obviously get someone in to get all that in, from the beginning. So that's fantastic. So in terms of then, so say someone says, okay, right, I've got this product. This is what I do. I've created it in my home kitchen. It's become really popular. I've done it at market stalls or festivals, and now I'm really wanting to get it, into distribution and retail. So take us through the process that if they come to you and say, right, I want to make sure all my I's and dotted and T's crossed. They come to you. What do you sort of take us through the procedure of what you would then do with that client?
Well, I would, I would sit down with them and go over what I call it the scope of the project. What do you expect, the food scientist to provide to you? But then I would, watch the product being made, and help them through every step of the process. I would ask them a lot of questions about, how do they source ingredients? Where do you get, say if it's a plant-based product, it's like, where do you get your ingredients? What are the specifications? And that includes things like all natural, non-GMO, kosher, organic, if that applies. How many companies have you looked to source material from? And then, going over the specifications with them as to what's important, so you work back from the finished product. So let's say it's a vegetarian burger, okay, frozen vegetarian burger. And as you know, there's, 5 or 6 different types of vegetarian burgers. Some mimic hamburgers, some are very different and, are based on, a conglomeration of different types of plant-based products. Some are cooked, some are not, some are, have an actual grilled flavor, some don't. And so you start from the finished product and you say, okay, and this is where the entrepreneur or the owner of the company is really critical. It's like, why is this product different? And what is absolutely critical that you have to control to make sure this finished product is exactly what you want it to be? And, so you go through all the sensory attributes, color, flavor, texture, aroma, those are important things to define. And then you kind of go back through the process and say, okay, what are the things from the raw materials through to the finished product that make sure that those things are consistent? And, as you sort of create this roadmap to, okay, you might have, 5 or 6 ingredients to get to this finished product, you start to define what are the absolute critical parameters that you cannot overlook in order to get to this consistent finished product. And
Right.
And every product's different. Some products are really simple. Some products, you're putting things together. You might be taking an ingredient and cooking that ingredient before you add it, because that's part of your proprietary, process. All those things have to be defined. And then it's really a process of going back and defining, what are the specifications of the raw materials? What are the what I call in-process specifications that we can measure to make sure the product comes out consistently? And then before we ship the product, what are those finished product things that we need to test and or taste, before we say, okay, we're now going to release this to shipment? And it's actually fairly logical once you start going through it, but it is an incredible amount of what I call questions and, just sort of asking somebody, what is what is really critical about your product, and how do you expect it to be different from, say, your competition or another product that's next to you on the retail shelf.
Got it. Can I hear a cat in the background?
Oh, yeah, actually, sorry.
How fabulous. No, don't apologise. I've had dogs occasionally come on. What's his or her name?
It's Ray, Rae.
Ray. Hello, Ray. We'll give her a little call out. Hello,
okay.
Ray.
Yeah, I was like, if I shut her up, she would actually make more noise.
No, she's awesome. It's fine. I just wanted to acknowledge her.
Yeah, she's about 9 months old, and so far she hasn't jumped on the keyboard.
Baby. Oh, bless her. That's fabulous. Okay, cool. Now, this is great stuff. So I just wanted to ask you about the shelf life thing, which I think you've explained really well. So in terms of the shelf life then, are you saying, so if someone's got, say we'll use the example of the bar, so if they've created their bar in their home kitchen, are you saying, and say they've got all these ingredients, are you able to come in and say, okay, I'm looking at your list of ingredients, yes, they'll be fine on the shelf for X amount of time? Or would that person have to literally test it and wait 9 months and see what it's like after 9 months?
Well, almost no one waits 9 months. So there's a couple of things you can do. One is you wait 2 or 3 months, and that's when most of the change would happen in terms of texture. The other is what's called an accelerated test. So you can put the product in a chamber at 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which accelerates things like rancidity or flavor changes. In the cereal industry, when I worked for Kellogg's, it was a rough equivalent of 1 week at 100 degrees equal 1 month at room temperature or 70 degrees. And that's what, so you can do a couple of things to kind of lower your risk of a problem that take less time than the 9 months. But honestly, I have seen clients that, you really do just have to put the product in a chamber, or in a room at 70 degrees and see what happens at room temperature before you're entirely sure. Like I said, almost no one waits the 9 months, but again, a food scientist can tell you what are your risks. Like, almonds might go rancid, oils might go rancid, certain things might change texture. So we can look at similar products to determine if we think there's going to be a problem, but you're never sure until you actually, wait the whole time.
Got it. Now that makes sense. Fantastic. What are your thoughts on certifications, Mary? So, actually having those like things like, a product certified to be gluten-free or vegan or organic or kosher or any of those. How important is it for a product to go that route?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. I think consumers have become much more sophisticated in their understanding of different products. And also, I believe that certifications kind of keep you on your toes. So, for example, gluten-free, there's a whole process by which you do testing to verify that you're gluten-free, and that is sort of overseen by a certifier. So just like with organic certification, gluten-free has certain requirements that you must meet. Kosher, I think, is always a good certification, mostly because, you have a certain number of people who look for that as a quality kind of symbol. And in the plant-based world, there's vegan certifications, and I think, consumers are looking for those things as another assurance that, number one, the company is ethical and is really paying attention to detail. But also because, there's a lot of companies out there that, they might say they're gluten-free, but you're not really sure. And I believe in transparency, in the sense that, the more information you can give consumers, the more they appreciate, that you're being transparent.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And from a consumer perspective, I mentioned I enjoy raw bars, and even if I check the ingredients and I say, well, it pretty much looks like it's vegan, I like the fact that it says it's vegan on it, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I'll actually favour a company that has taken the time to, say that it's vegan or has it certified vegan. So that's good that you've mentioned that. So just final couple of questions. I just want to talk to you a little bit about trends, because obviously, as I say, you've been in the food industry, the natural and the organic sector for quite some time now. Just in terms of the whole vegan, plant-based trend, which is obviously ramped up hugely over the past couple of years or so, what are your thoughts then on whether a company should actually use the word vegan as opposed to, say, plant-based in its marketing materials, or its branding, or even its packaging?
Well, I do think that we're still in the kind of situation where vegan can sometimes indicate, maybe something that doesn't taste so good. So it's just like gluten-free for a long time meant, well, it was gluten-free, but it probably wasn't as good as, if you had a gluten-free chocolate chip cookie, it probably wasn't as good as a regular chocolate chip cookie. I think that has been dispelled by a number of good products that are out on the market. And I think vegan is going to go through that same cycle where, consumers will start to realize that vegan doesn't mean it probably doesn't taste good. And so I usually recommend that clients use plant-based or some other descriptor. It's okay to put vegan, and it's okay to certify to a vegan standard. But rather than putting vegan in the name or, some other indication that, it's for vegans only. Because if you look at, the overall consumer population, the vegan consumers are a small part of the population. So vegetarians might be 10%. And, people who want to eat vegetarian some of the time is a much larger percentage. So you really want to appeal to as broad a consumer group as possible, but you also want the vegans to understand that, you're serious about, their needs. And so I see a lot of companies, for example, plant-based companies who are, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, because they see that consumers are really looking for the cleanest products and the most allergen-free, particularly for their children. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis, but I would say that, rather than saying, a vegan burger, you might talk about plant-based nutrition, but have a certification from a vegan certifier that your product meets that requirement.
Perfect. No, that makes absolutely perfect sense. Wonderful. So final question then, Mary, what have been the key lessons you've learned through running your consulting business? So that could be, things you've learned about yourself or others or professional, or even just things you've learned about clients and businesses.
Well, I would say a couple of key things. I mean, one, you mentioned it was learning how to communicate to marketing people and to entrepreneurs, which is different than talking to another food scientist. So I've learned to translate the science and the food safety and things into something people can understand. And I actually really like marketing people because I know that the best quality product won't sell without a good market and a good name and marketing program. So that's one thing. I think that the second thing is entrepreneurs are really, really interesting people, and they have incredible skill sets, but they also have incredible weaknesses. And I think the biggest thing to be able to is try to communicate to them is how they can magnify their strengths and compensate for their weaknesses, because because all of us have our strengths and weaknesses. We can't really change our weaknesses to a significant extent. I mean, if we're not organized, we're not really going to be, super organized because it's just not our thing. Okay. And so one of the things I've learned about both working for entrepreneurs and working with entrepreneurs is to help them try to understand where their strengths are and how they can compensate for the things that they don't do well, instead of thinking that they can do everything well.
That's a good point. And I just wanted to clarify with you, Mary, as well. So I know you're based within the US. Do you work solely in the US market, or do you work internationally? Or if someone was from another country and they wanted to bring their product into America, just want to clarify the market that you work with.
Oh, I definitely work internationally. I've done projects with companies in all parts of the world. I've been to India and China and Europe and all over. The market for natural, organic, plant-based, is not just a U.S. market, and so I'm happy to work with companies from other countries, and I love to travel. As well, I can help companies understand the U.S. market. I don't know other markets as well as the U.S. market. So I'm very comfortable telling them, here's the distributors, here's how you get into retailers and that sort of thing, because I have that experience. I'm not as experienced in the supply chain in other countries, but I certainly understand sort of the basics, how to manufacture product, the steps in product development and that sort of thing, which there's no difference between the U.S. and other countries on those things.
For sure. And the food science, I guess, is pretty similar in that almonds are kind of, I don't know, I think the same anywhere, but
that's a global science for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Fantastic. So, Mary, you've shared so much wonderful information. I know I've learned heaps, and you've definitely nailed it, as you say, in regards to translating. I was thinking before I interviewed, I hope she's not going to use these really long words with all these weird ingredients, and you haven't at all. It's made absolutely perfect sense. I'm not even in the food sector per se, and that's made a lot of sense. So I think this interview is going to be so valuable to our listeners. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure.
So that was Mary Mulry of FoodWise One. You can find out more about Mary on her LinkedIn profile, or you can email her at foodwiseone@gmail.com and put in the subject header via Katrina Fox, or you can contact her by phone on 303 641 3685. And all those details are on the show notes page at veganbusinessmedia.com/podcasts and going to episode 56. Now for our vegan business news roundup. The most popular snacks favoured by Instagram users in the US during the Super Bowl game were vegan, reports Veg News. Television service provider DirecTV analysed 25,660 food-related posts from January to October 2015 with the hashtag GameDay. Analysis by individual states and which Game Day posts received the most likes found watermelon to be the most popular snack across the country, followed by vegan snacks. In terms of engagement, vegan snacks received the most likes across the board. DirecTV said in its report, "We discovered a definite trend in favoured foods, suggesting that while classics like #NoFilter chicken wings still hold a special place in the heart of the nation, vegan offerings have recently taken Game Day by storm." Well, that's marvellous, and we need to continue this so that those no-filtered chicken wings are replaced with vegan chicken wings in the hearts of the nation. But more good news showing that plant-based foods are finally shedding their bland, boring image, and people are waking up to the fact that vegan eating can be delicious. Vegan butcher has been named a top new job trend for 2017 by Time Money. In a feature titled 7 New Jobs That Are So 2017, writer Kristin Barler lists vegan butcher, citing the success and high-profile media coverage of Beyond Meat's Beyond Burger, which debuted at Whole Foods in Boulder, Colorado last year, and Impossible Foods' Impossible Burger, which is now sold in several high-end restaurants in California, as well as Chef David Chang's Momofuku Nishi eatery in New York. Vegan butcher joined other interesting job titles, including YouTube sex educator, simulated astronaut, professional activist, bug bounty hunter. Now don't worry, they're not hurting insects. These are actually hackers paid by companies to find vulnerabilities in their software and websites, compost collector, and death doula. Well, those are certainly some creative positions. It's good to see vegan butcher in there, and of course it's great PR for the companies mentioned. And as I say in my PR training for vegan business owners, it's great to be included in these kinds of listicle articles. Italian pizza chain Zizi in the UK plans to add more vegan options to its menu in March after its January 2017 sales increased by 150%, reports Vegan Food and Living. After launching its vegan menu last year with 9 vegan toppings, including some with dairy-free cheese made from rice, Zizi has already sold 30,000 vegan dishes this year. Marketing director Joe Fawcett said, "The dishes are so great that we're seeing people who aren't even committed vegans choose them." Well, this is good news, especially as I found out there's a branch of Zizi on Wigmore Street in central London. And as you may know, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, I'm very partial to pizza. So I'm going to be checking out Zizi when I'm back in my hometown in October this year, presenting at the UK's first vegan trade show, VegFest UK Trade. And of course, it's fantastic to see vegan options getting more and more popular and mainstream eateries recognising this and hopefully eventually will take animal products off their menus completely. Finally, a vegan beauty parlour and hair salon is due to open in Brooklyn, New York this week, reports DNA Info. Deborah Hare Bay will open her eponymous Deborah Hare Bay private parlour, an appointment-only salon, along with her OMHH, which stands for Oh My Heavenly Hair, beauty retail store in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Hare Bay started the natural vegan product line OMHH in 2000, years after launching her first salon in Prospect Heights. She describes it as a glamorously natural lifestyle brand that is concerned about whole body care and health. I love that, and I really love the name as well. Oh My Heavenly Hair. It's a sort of brand name that you want to say with a lot of gusto, so I'll just say it again. Oh My Heavenly Hair. And the store will also host community events, including a makeup tips workshop, along with Valentine's Day and Women's History Month celebrations. Well, this sounds like a fabulous place to visit. Love the emphasis on natural and healthy beauty. Fantastic. So that's it for this episode of Vegan Business Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a review and rating on iTunes or any other platform you're listening on. Finally, I encourage you to head over to veganbusinessmedia.com, where you can find more resources, including details of my media and PR consultations, copywriting, editing and proofreading services to help you grow your vegan business. I'm Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business, and I look forward to catching up with you in the next episode of Vegan Business Talk. Bye for now.